The first snowfall of December had come early, coating everything in quiet white. Pine branches sagged under its weight, rooftops disappeared under soft blankets, and the world seemed paused, as if it was holding its breath. Inside a small cabin on the edge of Miller's Ridge, Jonathan Hayes sat at his wooden table, staring at a chipped mug that had long gone cold. Across from him sat a small girl with chestnut curls and a freckled nose. Her hands carefully arranged 3 plates on the dining table. "Daddy?" she said softly. "Does Mommy like snow?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. He watched as little Emma placed a fork beside the empty plate. "The third one. The one that had never been removed since last winter." "I think she does, sweet pea," he managed quietly. Emma smiled at the empty chair. "I hope she sees it from heaven. It's beautiful today." Outside, the wind whispered through leafless trees. Inside, silence pressed against the walls. 1 year. 1 year since illness had taken Lydia from them. 1 year of Jonathan existing instead of living. Waking, working, feeding Emma, sleeping, repeating. The world had kept spinning, but he had stopped moving with it. He stood and turned away before his daughter could see the pain in his eyes. The cabin, once filled with laughter and music, had become a museum of grief. Lydia's knitted blanket lay draped over the back of the couch. The little flower pots on the windowsill were still there, frozen in time. Every corner whispered her name. Jonathan grabbed his coat and headed outside to the woodpile. Work was the only thing that kept his thoughts at bay. As he lifted the axe, a thin curl of smoke rose in the distance. Another cabin, down the edge of the forest, recently occupied. A woman had moved there late in the fall, just before the heavy cold set in. A widow, the town said. Some called her the Forest Woman. Others called her trouble waiting to happen. Jonathan hadn't met her. He hadn't wanted to. Getting close meant risk. Risk meant pain. And pain was something he had already buried too deep to touch again. "Daddy!" Emma ran out into the snow, her boots leaving tiny footprints. "Is it true someone lives over there now?" He followed her gaze toward the faint trail of smoke. "Yes, a lady and her little boy, I think." "Are they lonely too?" she asked. Jonathan swallowed hard. "I don't know." But he already felt the answer in his chest. That night, as the wind rattled the window panes, Emma's tiny voice floated from her room. "Dear God, please make Daddy smile again. And if it's okay, please send us a friend. Or maybe a mama for the house. But I will still love my first mommy forever. Amen." Jonathan closed his eyes, his heart cracking open all over again. Saturday brought him into town for supplies. It always did. The general store was warm and noisy with holiday chatter. Garlands lined the shelves. Bells hung above the counter. Cinnamon filled the air. Emma ran toward the candy jars immediately. That's when he saw her. She stood near the far wall, a little boy clinging shyly to her skirt. Dark curls framed her face. Her coat was worn but clean. Her eyes weren't just beautiful. They were tired, kind, strong. The Forest Woman. She noticed him looking, and instead of looking away, she walked toward him. "Mr. Hayes, isn't it?" His breath caught. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Elijah Morgan," she said, nodding toward him. "And this is my son Noah." Jonathan tipped his hat. Emma peeked around his leg, staring at the boy. "I've noticed your truck pass our road every day," Elijah continued calmly. "And I've noticed how your little girl stands by the window and watches. The road like she's waiting for something that never comes." Her words weren't cruel, just honest. "She lost her mother," Jonathan said softly. "I wasn't sure if the town had already told you." "I lost my husband," Elijah replied. "I'm sure the town told you that too." They stood in silence for a moment, eyes locked in understanding neither of them could fully explain. "Christmas is hard on the lonely," she added. "Yes, it is. My boy hasn't put up a tree yet," she said quietly. "He thinks it doesn't matter if no one's around to see it sparkle." Jonathan glanced at Emma again. She was already offering the boy a peppermint candy. "We haven't put one up either," Jonathan admitted. "Then maybe," Elijah said, almost daring the moment, "we should give our children something worth seeing." The store seemed to fade away. "Would you care to join us for supper tomorrow evening?" she asked. Not pleading, just offering. No strings, no promises, just warmth and a table that doesn't feel so empty. Jonathan's first instinct was fear. Retreat. protect the past. But then he imagined Emma's empty plate. Yes, he said. Yes, we would. A small smile graced Elijah's lips. I'll be looking forward to it, Mr. Hayes. As she walked away, Emma tugged his coat. Daddy? She feels sad like you, but she smiles better. He couldn't argue with that. That night, as loose snow tapped against the glass, Jonathan stood in front of Lydia's photograph. I don't know if I am ready, he whispered. But I know Emma deserves a little light. The wind blew softly outside. And for the first time in a year, he didn't feel completely alone. The next evening came slowly, as if the sun itself was hesitant to disappear behind the snowy hills. Jonathan had spent the afternoon pacing the cabin, adjusting things that didn't need fixing, wiping down an already clean table, adding an extra log to the fire even though the room was warm enough. Emma watched him from the edge of the couch, her head tilted sideways. Daddy, are you nervous? She asked. No, sweetheart, he replied too quickly. Just making sure everything is nice. She smiled knowingly. That's what people do when they're nervous. Jonathan huffed a small laugh, surprising even himself. A knock came at the door just as the first star appeared in the darkening sky. Emma bolted upright. They're here! Jonathan's hands froze for half a second before he gathered himself and opened the door. Elijah stood there, snow dusting her shoulders, a basket cradled in her arms. Noah stood beside her, eyes wide, gripping a small wooden toy in his hand. Good evening, she said softly. Please come in. Warm air rushed out as the door opened. Elijah stepped inside, pausing for just a moment as if feeling the presence of someone who used to live there. Jonathan noticed her eyes briefly flick toward the knitted blanket on the couch. It's cozy, she said. It feels like a home that forgot how to laugh, but still remembers how. Her words struck deeper than she knew. They set the basket down on the counter. What did you bring? Emma asked eagerly. Stew meat, herbs, and a small apple pie, Elijah replied. My husband used to say winter tasted better with cinnamon. Noah looked up at Jonathan. My mama makes the best pies, he announced proudly. I believe that, Jonathan said. Soon the kitchen filled with life and movement. Elijah moved naturally around his space, not intruding, not replacing, just filling the quiet gaps with energy. The stew simmered, fragrant and rich. Emma and Noah sat on the floor, lining up pine cones and pretending they were horses galloping through snow. Jonathan watched them. Two children who had been walking alone suddenly found company. It scared him, and it healed him at the same time. Dinner was unlike any he had eaten in a year. Laughter echoed around the table. Stories replaced silence. Instead of staring at an empty chair, Jonathan watched two small faces lit by firelight. Emma rested her head briefly on Elijah's arm during dessert. Neither noticed. Everyone noticed. Thank you for inviting us, Jonathan said later, as the children colored by the fire. Thank you for saying yes, Elijah replied. Their eyes met, holding longer this time. What did you do before you moved to this place? Jonathan asked gently. Elijah looked down at her hands. There were faint scars on her knuckles, marks of work, of hardship. I taught music in a small town up north, she said. Piano and violin mostly. My husband worked construction. One winter morning, the roof gave way. Cold and steel don't mix with bones very well. I'm sorry, he whispered. So am I, she answered. But sorrow isn't a home. I couldn't raise Noah inside a heart that never healed. So I came here, where the world is quieter, where it hurts less. Jonathan nodded slowly. My Lydia got sick suddenly. Fever that wouldn't break. Doctors couldn't make it in time through the storm. I held her hand and she, his voice broke, went cold while I was still holding on. Silence filled the space, but this time it wasn't empty. It was shared. The dead don't need our tears, Elijah said gently. But the living need our hands. He looked up, startled by the truth in her words. Late that night, after Elijah and Noah left, Emma climbed into Jonathan's bed without asking. Daddy, when she smiles, the house feels warmer. Jonathan kissed her hair. Does that make you happy? Yes, she whispered. But I still love Mommy. And Mommy still loves you, he said. And so do I. Down the snowy path, Elijah watched the moon while Noah walked beside her. Do you like them, Mama? He asked. I think, she said quietly. I forgot how to breathe. And then tonight, I remembered. Over the next several days, small visits happened. Emma began walking to the forest edge, just to wave at Noah through the trees. Elijah would leave fresh bread by Jonathan's steps. He would respond by chopping firewood and stacking it by her door without a word. Slow acts. Care without confession. The town, however, had begun to notice. Whispers grew heavier. Eyes lingered longer. Especially one pair. Henry Wallace. Rich in land, poor in kindness. His family had once tried to court Elijah into marrying him for stability. She had refused him. Kindly. Firmly. Men like Henry didn't forget that kind of rejection. One afternoon at the general store, Jonathan felt the air shift as he walked in. "Well, if it isn't the grieving saint," Henry's voice drawled from behind him. "Healed fast, didn't you? Found yourself a new woman before the ground settled on the old one." Jonathan's hands curled into fists. "Mind your business, Henry." Hard to when your business walks around town with another man's widow hanging off your arm. The words cut like glass. "This doesn't concern you." "Oh, it concerns the whole town. Christian place, this is. We don't like our women passing from one bed to the next while their husbands are still fresh in the dirt." Jonathan stepped forward, ready to swing. Then he saw Elijah standing outside the door, having heard every word. Her face was pale but unbroken. "This time?" Jonathan didn't look away. "You'll apologize," he said quietly. "Right now?" Henry laughed. "Or what? Or I'll show you what a loyal man looks like." Silence. The entire store watched. Henry sneered, but he stepped back. "Wasn't worth it anyway," he spat. Jonathan turned to Elijah. "I should have said something sooner," he said. "I should have stood next to you the very first day." Elijah studied his face, searching for truth. "And now?" she asked. "Now I'd rather be judged for standing than praised for running." Something softened in her eyes. Outside, snow drifted down. "Are you afraid?" she whispered. "Yes," he admitted, "but not of them." "Then don't be afraid of me either," she replied. Their hands brushed, the smallest touch. But it felt like the first brick of a new home being placed. That night, as Emma and Noah built snow angels together, Jonathan stood beside Elijah. "Why did you really come to my door that first night?" he asked. "Because," she said, staring up at the stars, "when I saw your child setting an extra plate at the window, I knew loneliness had built a home inside your walls. And loneliness recognizes loneliness." He looked at her. She turned to him. "And sometimes," she added, "it also recognizes love, long before the heart is ready to admit it." Snow fell gently around them, wrapping the world in silence again. But this time the silence felt warm, like the beginning of something that had been waiting far too long to be found. The snow began to fall harder the following night, the kind that swallowed sound, the kind that made the world feel trapped between breaths. Jonathan stood at the edge of his porch, watching the flakes spin down from the sky, each one disappearing the moment it touched the ground. In the distance, a weak golden light flickered from Elijah's cabin. It stayed on far later than usual. Something in his chest felt wrong. Too quiet. He pulled on his coat and made his way down the narrow path, boots crunching through fresh snow. When he reached the front steps, he hesitated only a moment before knocking. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. His hand closed around the door handle. Unlocked. Inside, the air was cold. The fireplace was dead. A chair sat overturned on the floor. "Elijah?" he called out. A faint sound came from the bedroom. He rushed forward and pushed open the door. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, both hands pressed to her face, shoulders trembling. Noah slept on the mattress beside her, curled into a small, frightened ball. "Elijah!" Jonathan knelt in front of her. "What happened?" She looked up. Tears streaked over her cheeks, eyes swollen with pain she had buried for too long. "He came," she whispered. "Who?" "Shh, Henry." Jonathan froze. He waited until dark, knocked on the door like an old friend. Her voice shook. "He said I had no right to sit in another man's home while my husband lay in the ground. He said if I wanted food and protection, I should have chosen better when I had the chance." Jonathan clenched his jaw so hard it ached. "I told him to leave." Then he laughed. He said widows don't get to choose. They get chosen. Rage bloomed under Jonathan's skin, dangerous and hot. He didn't touch you, did he? She shook her head. No. I told him I wasn't afraid anymore. And that's when he looked at me like I'd already lost. Jonathan gently took her hands away from her face. You are not alone, he said firmly. Do you hear me? Not tonight. Not ever again. But you shouldn't have to protect me, she murmured. I didn't move here to need saving. I'm not saving you, he replied. I'm standing beside you. There's a difference. She looked into his eyes. Really looked this time. And if that makes the town hate you? She asked. Then the town will just have to learn how to forgive me for being happy. Something inside her finally broke. A sob left her lips as she leaned forward into his chest. For a moment he was taken by surprise. Then he wrapped his arms around her. Her heart beat wildly against his. Trembling, living, real. Noah stirred slightly but didn't wake. Jonathan rested his chin on top of her head. I used to believe that loving again meant betraying Lydia, he whispered. But now I realize betrayal was letting her memory keep me frozen in time. Elijah pulled back slightly, her fingers still gripping the material of his coat. And what do you believe now? She asked. I believe she would want me to choose life, he said. And right now, life is standing right in front of me. A quiet filled the room. Heavy. Honest. That frightens me, she admitted. Me too. Then why does it feel like peace? She asked. Because broken things recognize when someone is trying to make them whole again. Outside the storm howled. Inside, two fractured hearts steadied each other. The next morning, the entire town knew what had happened. Henry's shadow followed Jonathan down the dusty, snow-covered street. You think protecting her makes you a hero? Henry spat as they crossed paths. No, Jonathan answered calmly. I think letting her get hurt would have made me the villain. This will follow you, Henry warned. People don't forget. I hope they remember, Jonathan replied. So their daughters don't grow up thinking silence is bravery. Henry stepped back, unsettled for the first time. That afternoon, Elijah arrived quietly at Jonathan's cabin with Noah's hand in hers. Emma spotted them from the window and ran to the door, flinging it open. You came! She gasped happily, hugging Elijah's waist. I was scared you'd disappear. I wouldn't leave without saying goodbye, Elijah said softly. And I'm not giving up on this place just because someone tried to chase me out of it. Jonathan's chest tightened at her words. They sat together as snow blanketed the land again. The fire crackled. The children huddled under quilts, whispering stories. Then, as the sun dipped low, Elijah spoke. There is something you should know about me before this goes any further, she said. Jonathan turned to her, suddenly alert. When Henry asked me to marry him, I didn't only say no because I didn't love him. She swallowed. I said no because I couldn't love anyone at all after my husband died. I built a wall so thick, even I couldn't climb it. Then why now? He asked softly. Because when I saw Emma's extra plate, I realized I wasn't the only one terrified of a life. Half-lived. She met his eyes. And because, Jonathan, you made me feel seen. Not claimed. Not chosen. Just seen. His breath caught. I don't want you because I lost my husband, she continued. And I don't want you because you lost your wife. I want you because of the man you are trying to become right now. That was it. The line between fear and truth finally vanished. He reached for her hand. Not a flinch. Not a doubt. Just warmth. And for the first time in a very long while, certainty. Outside, snow brushed against the walls like whispers of approval. Inside, the children had long fallen asleep side by side, curled into the safety of something new. Jonathan looked down at Elijah's hand in his. You know the town won't make this easy, he said. I don't want easy, she replied. I want real. He smiled faintly. Then we'll build real. A final silence fell over the cabin. Not lonely, not broken. Anticipating. And somewhere deep within him, Jonathan knew. The hardest part wasn't the snow. The hardest part wasn't the judgment. The hardest part would be saying the words out, loud on the one night that mattered most. Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in silence. Not the empty kind that once filled Jonathan's cabin, but the kind that feels like the world is pausing to witness something sacred. Snow drifted slowly from the sky, each flake settling like a blessing on the earth. The trees stood tall and still, dusted in white. Candlelight flickered in the windows of the small cabin on Miller's Ridge. Inside, warmth glowed not only from the fire, but from something far deeper. Emma and Noah lay on the floor side by side, tangled in quilts, whispering stories to one another as shadows danced along the walls. "Do you think Santa knows our house is different now?" Emma asked. "I think he knows when hearts change," Noah replied. "That's more important than houses." Jonathan glanced toward Elijah. She stood by the window, watching the snow as it fell, her arms wrapped around herself. The soft light touched her face, and for a moment, she looked more like a dream than a woman. He felt the pull of the moment, the kind that may never come again. "Can you watch the children for a minute?" he asked gently. Elijah nodded and guided Emma and Noah toward the small bedroom. Jonathan stepped outside into the cold. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he crossed the short distance to his old maple tree. Beneath it sat the small wooden bench where he had once sat with Lydia in summers past. He hadn't dared come here in nearly a year. He brushed snow away and sat down. For the first time, not in sadness, but in gratitude. "I loved you," he whispered into the quiet night. "And I always will." But love never meant loneliness. Love meant life. You taught me that when you were still here. I'm sorry it took me so long to believe it. The wind stirred the branches like a gentle reply. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Jonathan didn't turn. "She always sat with you here, didn't she?" Elijah asked softly. "Yes. And tonight, do you feel like she is here? Or like she is letting you go?" Elijah asked. Jonathan finally faced her. "She's letting me go," he said. "And I think she's thanking you for catching me before I fell too far." A hush settled between them. Snow continued to fall. "Elijah," he said quietly, "I have been terrified of this moment, not because I doubt you, but because I know once I speak these words, nothing in my life will ever be the same again." She stepped closer, her eyes gentle but unblinking. "Then only speak them if they are true," she said. "They are," he replied. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside rested a simple ring, crafted by an old man in town who knew the language of second chances. "I don't have riches. I don't have perfection. I don't have a life untouched by loss," he said. "But I have hands willing to build again, a heart that has remembered how to feel again, and a love that only exists because you were brave enough to exist in my life." Her eyes glistened. "Elijah Morgan, will you be my wife? Not because we are broken, but because together we are finally whole." For a long, trembling moment, she said nothing. Then slowly, she knelt in the snow in front of him. "No man has ever asked me to be his equal," she whispered. "Until now." She took the ring. "Yes, Jonathan. Yes, I will walk beside you. Yes, I will be your wife. And yes, I will love you not out of loss, but out of life." He slid the ring onto her finger, both of them trembling, both of them smiling through quiet tears. Inside the cabin, Emma suddenly sat upright. "Noah, they're out there forever!" They burst through the door and ran toward them, laughter ringing through the silent valley. "You said yes?" Emma cried. "Yes, little one," Elijah laughed. "I said yes." Emma wrapped her arms around them both. "Then does this mean I have two parents again?" Jonathan knelt to her level, cupping her cheeks. "It means you will always have love. And sometimes love gives us more than we ever imagined." Noah hugged Jonathan for the first time, not as a guest, as a son. Christmas morning dawned slowly over the valley. The town gathered in the small white church, unaware of what awaited them. Jonathan and Elijah entered hand in hand, Emma and Noah walking between them. The whispers came, but something else came too. Hope. Reverend Thomas stepped forward, eyeing them both. "We celebrate birth today," he said softly. "Not of flesh, but of new life. And I see a family standing here who has chosen life with courage instead of fear." He smiled at them. "You are welcome here." One by one, others followed. Nods, smiles, warmth. Even those who once glowed with judgment now softened. Henry Wallace watched from the back, but he said nothing. And for once his silence had no power. Later that afternoon, Jonathan brought Elijah and the children to Lydia's resting place. He knelt beside the stone. "Lydia, this is Elijah. And Noah," he said gently. "Please know, you are not replaced. You are honored." And because of you, our children now laugh again." Elijah laid white flowers on the grave. "I will teach Emma about you, and I will thank you every day for the love that still moves through this family." Snow fell lightly as if in response. Not cold, not harsh, gentle. That night, firelight bathed the cabin in gold. 4 hearts breathed the same air. 4 souls shared the same warmth. 2 broken people had not erased their past. They had built a future upon it. Jonathan held Elijah close beneath a shared quilt. "What should we name this new life?" she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "Home." Outside, snow covered the valley, erasing old tracks, filling old wounds, giving the land a second beginning. And for the first time in a long, long while, Jonathan closed his eyes without fear, because love had finally found him, and this time he had chosen not to run.